Hi, welcome back to my little channel where I talk about things that interest me and maybe interest you. This time again I'm going to be presenting a video. This is a British TV programme from 1989. The reason I'm doing this is that death occurred, or was reported last week, I believe it occurred a few months ago, in America, of an 80-year-old man by the name of William Calley. Calley would have been well known once, infamous as the officer in charge of a company of soldiers who carried out what was regarded as America's worst atrocity in the Vietnam War, the massacre of women and children and old men in the village of My Lai, Pinkville, I believe the Americans called that area at the time. And it was, some would say it's the only one that got reported. Seymour Hersh is the journalist. I think it was about 8 or 9 months later the story got out due to reporting by Seymour Hersh. This programme, made in 1989, looks at what happened and interviews the men involved, the men from that company, some of them, and it's grim stuff. I remembered when I heard the news that I had a video of that British programme, so I digitized it and presenting it here because I think it's important for these things to be remembered. You might need a strong stomach to watch this. There are pictures here you won't have seen before. There's details of the massacre. It was more than just killing. What happened here is pretty terrible. I'll just suggest to bear two things in mind. The first is that this is about armies. Happens to be the American army. Could have been any army. Armies are groups of men who are trained, practically brainwashed into being ferocious. More ferocious than the other guy. That's how they'll win. So, beyond all the flags and marching bands, men are trained to be brutal. And they deal with that in this programme. Even recently, we've heard of, the Australians, happy-go-lucky Australians. Everybody loves Australians. Recently revealed that the Australian army in Afghanistan killed about 40 prisoners. They were getting new recruits in the special forces to be blooded by killing prisoners. That's recorded, investigated in America, or in Australia. It's not a rumour. Here in Ireland, our own army in the Civil War carried out atrocities, the worst at Ballyseedy. They tied a lot of prisoners to a mine. They blew it up. There were so many body parts scattered around. They didn't notice one man was blown almost intact into a field and he crawled away, and the story got out. So it's this isn't any anti-American post. It's looking at human nature and how horrible human nature is. There was another famous person from that massacre by the name of Hugh Thompson, who was an American helicopter pilot, landed his chopper, told his gunner to train his weapon on the men that he saw advancing on a surviving group from the village, and he protected them and dissuaded the American soldiers from killing them. So that was a big thing for him to do, turn his gun on his own comrades. But he saw those people, innocent people, about to die, and he saved them, because human nature is wonderful. Both things are true. So the second thing I'd suggest you bear in mind is that the most important people here in this story are the victims. I know if we were looking at a massacre in France by the Germans, we wouldn't really be looking at it through the eyes of the perpetrators. But anyway, this is an interesting document, an interesting history. Grim, it's grim, and I wouldn't watch it if you have a faint heart. I wouldn't have kids in the room when this is on. The two producers made a book based out of this, and there's a lot more detail in the book. 4 Hours in My Lai, Michael Bilton and Kevin Sim. So if you are interested in the event, there's an awful lot more detail in this, and they deal a lot more with what happened afterwards, how it unfolded, how it became public, and the justice that may have been applied afterwards. So anyway, here we go. Let's look now. Mind yourself.
Tonight on First Tuesday.
It was quite clear that no one was to be spared in that village.
We go back to Vietnam and to the massacre at My Lai.
Deep down, we felt what we were doing was right. But after it was over, everyone knew it was wrong.
Good evening. Over the years on First Tuesday, we've done a number of films about men at war, about the universal soldier who fulfills bravely the requirements of his political masters. But tonight we're forced to look critically at the soldier himself and at the training which turns civilians into the killers that war requires. The My Lai Massacre in 1968, in which US troops killed nearly 500 Vietnamese civilians, was one of the incidents which swung American opinion decisively against involvement in Vietnam. It was truly horrific, but the fact is, it wasn't untypical of other incidents in the war, just bigger. Tonight, 20 years on, the My Lai killers tell us their story, of brutality even more barbarous than has ever been admitted officially, of the training which made them think the way they did, and of the Vietnamese faces which will haunt them to their graves. In Vietnam, those few who survived the massacre talk of their lost families and their everlasting loneliness. All the legacy of 4 hours in My Lai.
Can you tell me, Bernardo, what this book is? It's just, why you've kept it?
This is my life. This is my past, this is my present, this is my future. And I keep it, to remind me. But it's always there. This is it. This is my life. This is everything. This is the way I am. This is what made me this way.
My Lai today, a small hamlet close to the coast of central Vietnam. On their maps, the Americans called the area Pinkville, and that is how the massacre was known at first, the Pinkville Massacre. Today, the villagers are farmers and fishermen, just as they were 20 years ago. But then, My Lai was at the center of a bitterly contested region in a cruel war. Early one morning in March 1968, Charlie Company of the 1st 20th American Infantry Battalion landed here by helicopter and attacked the village. By the time they left, 4 hours later, the young GIs of Charlie Company had killed hundreds of old men, women, and children in cold blood. The village of My Lai had ceased to exist.
Let's go.
In Fort Benning, Georgia, new infantry recruits to the American Army receive their first rounds of ammunition and take their first steps as soldiers.
Keep right on trucking.
In 1967, at the height of the war, thousands of young men were sent here for basic training. Most were bound for Vietnam, including many of those who would eventually make up Charlie Company.
The transition from civilian to soldier is a very distinct and very rigorous training. Soldiers are taught all the things that they need to know about being a good soldier in those very early days and weeks in basic training.
Let's go, step it out, step it out. Keep your heads up. You all look like you're tired. Are you tired? No,
They are taught how to use weapons to kill. They are taught how to drill, how to march with weapons.
Get that weapon
And
up,
all of these drills and different maneuvers are carried out by orders.
Pumpkin, move out!
They are taught hand-to-hand fighting. They are taught close order fighting. They are taught how to deal with the enemy when they come face-to-face with him. They are trained to be killers. They are trained from their early weeks in basic training. They are taught how to use a bayonet.
Kill! 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 Kill!
Butt stroke to the growing series. Move!
Kill! Kill! Kill!
They are taught the spirit of the bayonet. The spirit of the bayonet is to kill. He wanted soldiers highly motivated. His way of motivating them was to have a response, a command and response from the soldiers. And he would say, what is the spirit of the bayonet? And to kill, Sergeant, to kill. What is the spirit of the bayonet? To kill. So soldiers were motivated along these lines.
What is the spirit of the bayonet?
Kill! 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 It's cold blues down!
And that would be their response. And he would drill them into a state of readiness. And he would just inspire them through his speaking and through his talking and through his teaching of what the spirit was. As one of the sergeants who trained the men of Charlie Company, I was very pleased with the way they turned out. They turned out to be very good soldiers.
The men of Charlie Company arrived in Vietnam from Hawaii in December 1967. They'd had no combat experience, but had performed well in training and were considered the best company in their battalion. Their average age was 20. They'd been drawn together from all over America. An Army report would later describe them as a typical cross-section of American youth assigned to most combat units.
The majority of the men in C Company were just your average normal Americans. Most of us were all middle income, middle class families. They were from all across the United States, Indiana. I was from Pennsylvania. So I'd say you had a good cross-section of the total population of the United States at that point in time. A lot of times when we were first in country, we would go to the villages up and down the highway, Highway 1. You'd play with the kids in between pulling guard duty. And one bridge in particular, there was a boy that always hung around up there with the GIs. We nicknamed him Six Fingers because he had an extra thumb. He had 6 fingers. But you'd always take him stuff, candy, pop. Take pictures with them, you know, GIs with the kids. You got to meet a lot of people.
There was no one else but us. We were in this company, in this place, all alone. We had a company of men that all came from one country, all came from the same culture, and we would drop 10,000 miles away, and we felt close that way because there was nobody else to feel close to.
American soldiers on patrol in Vietnam in 1968. This was the job of the infantry, the common grunts. And barely a month after their arrival in Vietnam, Charlie Company were deployed on operations like these in Quang Ngai province, around the area they called Pinkville, which was known to be sympathetic to the enemy.
When we first started losing members of the company, it was mostly through booby traps and snipers. We never really got into a main conflict per se where you could see who was shooting at you and you could actually shoot back at them one-on-one. Booby traps was the main problem.
Newsreel pictures show clearly enough the effect of booby traps. In the weeks leading up to My Lai, Charlie Company experienced many scenes like these. In a unit of little over 120 men, they lost 4 killed and 38 wounded, almost all by mines, booby traps and snipers. They could seldom find an enemy to shoot back at, and as their frustration grew, the distinction between combatants and civilians rapidly eroded.
I've seen the enemy, yes. But who is the enemy? You know, you had little kids over there that would shoot you or stab you in the back when you walk away. You know, who's the enemy? How can you distinguish between the enemy, the good or the bad? All of them look the same. That's the reason the war was so different. You know, it wasn't like the Germans over here or Japanese over there. They all look like North and the South. You know, so how can you tell?
Within a few weeks of arriving in the country, men from Charlie Company had already begun systematically mistreating their prisoners. There were reports of random killings and rapes. One GI took this snapshot of an interrogation involving torture. In mid-February, Lieutenant Calley, leader of the 1st Platoon, threw an old man down a well and shot him. No disciplinary action was taken.
When I saw American soldiers committing acts that would be called atrocities if somebody else had done them, I began to think that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had been just too naive all my life, that this was the way things really were. I tried not to think like that. I tried to keep my own values together, but it wasn't easy. Little by little, I began to see that this group of men was getting out of control.
On the 15th of March, plans were drawn up for an attack on My Lai, believed by intelligence to be the HQ of a Viet Cong battalion. Charlie Company was to mount the main attack, and fierce battle was anticipated. Colonel Aran Henderson, brigade commander, expressed irritation at past failures to close with the enemy and demanded more aggression. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Barker drew up detailed plans, and his orders were passed on to Charlie Company by their CO, Captain Ernest Medina. No one in the chain of command has ever accepted responsibility for what happened, but Charlie Company had little doubt about what they had to do.
The understanding or the order that was given was to kill everybody in the village. Someone asked if that meant the women and children, and the order was every village, because those people that were in the village, the women, the kid, VC, and they were Viet Cong, to the Viet Cong, to the South Vietnamese, the Americans. They weren't giving any assistance. They weren't helping us in the war whatsoever.
Clear that no one would.
It was quite clear was to be spared in that village.
My understanding was we were going in, we were going one hell of a fight, and we were going to kick some ass when we got done. There wasn't going to be anybody left. It turned out that way.
News film of a helicopter assault, one of thousands conducted by the Americans during the Vietnam War. The attack on My Lai started in the same way, just after 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a Saturday. According to intelligence, all civilians would have gone to market. Anyone still in the village would be Viet Cong. But intelligence was wrong. As the troops embarked, 12 minutes flying time away, many villagers were still finishing breakfast. At 7:22, the first helicopters left for My Lai. The first helicopters appeared over My Lai at 7:35 a.m. There was no hostile fire. Within 20 minutes, all 120 men and 5 officers of Charlie Company were landed. There was no opposition.
Buổi sáng chuẩn bị đi ra đồng là tà ba tập thang nó đánh, nó quằn, nó thả một quả khói, rồi phố bán đánh, đồng bào không biết chạy đâu, bán một số, còn một số nó dẫn đi tập trung, như tôi đây nó dẫn đi tập trung, rồi nó dẫn đi đến mương cây, dẫn đến mương cây nó bị ngồi xuống, ngồi nó biết đứng lại dậy, đứng lên, tưởng đâu là nó đứng nó cho về, cuối cùng đứng lên nó xô xuống mương cây, nó bám đồng bào ta cháy hết. Rồi vừa xong lúc đó mẹ con tôi chung núp nằm với mấy người cháy kia, cháy trước ngã chặn tôi.
I was 19 when I went to Vietnam. I was a rifleman specialist, 4th class. I was trained to kill, but the reality of killing someone is different from training and pulling the trigger. You know.
So you knew when you went into the village that if you found women, old men, children, anything that was living, you knew that you were going to have to kill them that day?
From women and children to dogs and cats, yes. Yes.
So,
but I didn't know it, that I was going to do that. I knew the women and children was there, but for me to say that I was going to kill them, I didn't know I was going to do that until it happened. I didn't know I was going to kill anyone. I didn't want to kill anyone. I wasn't raised up to kill. Yeah. Now, she was running with her back from a tree line, but she was carrying something. I didn't know if it was a weapon or what, but it was a woman. You know, I knew it was a woman. I didn't want to shoot a woman, you know, but I was given an order to shoot. So I'm thinking that she had a weapon running, so when I shot and I turned over, it was a baby. You know, shot about 4 times, 3 or 4 times. And the bullet just went through and shot the baby too, you know. And I turned over and I saw the baby face was half gone. You know? And I just blinked. I just went. The training came to me, the programming to kill. And I just started killing.
What do you mean you just started killing? Did you go looking for people to kill or what?
You didn't have to look. They was there. They was trying to get away. But they was just there. It wasn't hard to kill. It wasn't hard to find anyone to kill.
Không có gì. Ở đây thì làm ăn bình thường lắm. Mà khi không với má ba nó ồ ọt tới nó đổ quân xuống. Đổ quân xuống nó bồ dày 4 phía. Tôi mới thấy ở tràng này nó trang súng rồi nó bắn rồi đó. Nó bắn ra một loạt cái bà con cháy thôi ghê gớm. Số con bị lúa mới chặn, nằm úp lên cái mình thì thằng con nó chặn thằng con biểu thằng con đừng có khác. Chứ bây giờ bà con Mỹ nó bán cháy hết rồi nghe con. Bây giờ con đường khác để mẹ chặn có sống sót không? Mẹ con sống sót không? Rồi cái một hồi cái tôi nghe nó làm thinh. Nghe nó làm thinh cái tôi ngát cái đầu chạy dậy thì tôi sống sót là nhờ hơi cái sót chết chồng lên mình tôi đây nữa nè. Chồng lên mình tôi ngát cái đầu dậy thì tôi theo trang này nó đi lố nhố nó cứ chỉ trỏ biết vậy. Cái còn ai mà sống sót cục tựa nó ra nó bán lợ hơi dỗ dư nữa. Rồi cái hết rồi cái nghĩ tôi mẹ tôi em tôi con rồi chết chưa đó. Nghĩ nó đứt ruột đứt gân quá đi. Cam tù chết Mỹ lắm. Tội quá đi. Nghĩ tới chừng đồ thì ta phải khác chừng đấy.
That day in my life, I was personally responsible for killing between 20 and 25 people, about 25 people, personally.
Men,
From
women.
shooting them, to cutting their throats, to scalping them, to cutting off their hands and cutting out their tongue. I did that.
Why did you do all that? You didn't tell me. Why did you kill them and do that?
I just went. My mind just went. Wasn't the only one that did it. A lot of other people did it. I just killed once I started the training, the whole programming part of killing. It just came out.
But your training didn't tell you to scalp people or to cut ears?
No. But a lot of people were doing it. So I just followed suit. I just lost all sense of direction, of purpose. I just started killing any kind of way I could kill. It just came. I didn't know I had it in me. But like I said, after I killed the child, my whole mind just went. It just went. And once you start, it's very easy to keep on. Once you start. The hardest part is to kill, but once you kill, that's become easier to kill the next person and the next one and the next one. Because I had no feelings or no emotions or no nothing, no direction, I just killed them.
Most disturbing thing I saw was one boy. And this was something that, this is what haunts me from the whole ordeal down there. It was a boy with his arm shot up, half hanging on. And he just had this bewildered look in his face, and I'm like, what did I do? What's wrong? He was just, it's hard to describe. Couldn't comprehend. I shot the boy, killed him. And I like to think of it more or less as a mercy killing, because somebody else would have killed him in the end. But it wasn't right.
Throughout the morning of March the 16th, a photographer and reporter from an army newspaper followed Charlie Company through My Lai. These black and white photos, taken on an army camera, did not show what was happening to the people whose homes were burning or the fate of villagers rounded up by the GIs. But the photographer was also carrying his own camera.
I happened up on a group of GIs surrounding these people. And one of the American GIs yelled out, "Hey, he's got a camera." So they kind of all dispersed just a little bit, and I came up on them, and looking at the photograph, I noticed the one girl was kind of frantic, and an older woman trying to protect a small child, and the older woman in front was just, you know, kind of pleading, trying to begging and that, and another person, that woman was buttoning her blouse and holding a small baby. Okay, I took the photograph. I thought they were going to question the people. But just as soon as I turned and walked away, I heard firing. I looked around over the corner of my shoulder. I saw the people drop. I just kept on walking. At the time, it was just, capturing a reaction. But when you look at it later on in life, you know now these people are dead. They were shot. Just kind of an eerie type feeling that goes through your whole body. And you think back, could I have prevented this? How could I have prevented this? Yeah, it's a question I still kind of, ask myself today.
You lined up people? You were one of the people who was mowing down big groups of people?
A group of about 10. Yes.
What happened? Did you round them up?
We just round them up. Put them in a circle. And put me, a couple of more guys, and just put the M16 on automatic. Just mowed them down. Just killed them.
Have you ever seen any photographs of the people you killed?
Yes.
Have you got those photographs?
I have photographs of the people I killed.
Which photographs are they?
The man, the child, the woman, and the baby.
How can you bear to look at those today?
Because this is my life. This is my life. Even if I don't open a book, I see it. In my nightmares. And if I never open this book, it's still there.
During the mission, as it was going on, we kept just reconning around. Started seeing a lot of bodies. It didn't add up, how all these people were getting killed and wounded, and we weren't receiving any fire. Just, it didn't make sense. There was too many casualties there, and how they were, the locations they were in, figured out artillery couldn't do this because there were, bodies in places the artillery didn't hit, trying to get out of the village.
The radio traffic recorded between command helicopters betrays no knowledge of the slaughter that Warrant Officer Thompson was witnessing as he hovered just above ground. Between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, when he saw GIs advancing on another group of defenseless women and children, Thompson ordered his crew to turn their guns on their fellow Americans. Larry Coburn was Thompson's door gunner.
Warrant Officer Thompson was desperate to get these civilians, what he believed to be civilians, out of this bunker and into a safe area. He'd seen
beforehand that what he was trying to do to help the people on the ground wasn't getting done. He was convinced that the ground forces would kill these people if he couldn't get to them first. He landed the aircraft in between the American forces and the Vietnamese people in the bunker. Got out of the aircraft, had us get out of the aircraft with our weapons to cover him, and he went and had words with a lieutenant on the ground. He asked the lieutenant how he could get these people out of the bunker. The lieutenant said the only way he knew was with hand grenades. So when Warrant Officer Thompson came back to the aircraft, he was furious, and he was desperate to get these people out of the bunker. He told us he was going over to the bunker himself to see if he could get them out. I don't even think he took a rifle with him. I think he was, besides a sidearm, he was relatively unarmed. He told us if the Americans were to open fire on these Vietnamese as he was getting them out of the bunker, that we should return fire on the Americans.
When I did instruct my crew chief and gunner, to open up on them if they open up on any more civilians, I don't know how I'd have felt if they would have opened up on them. But that particular day, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. They were the enemy at that time, I guess. They were damn sure the enemy to the people on the ground.
With the aid of larger helicopter gunships, Hugh Thompson and his crew succeeded in airlifting to safety over a dozen old men, women and children.
Cái lần thứ nhất ấy, thì nó vô rồi anh máng bữa lớn người chạy, nó thấy chạy theo, nó coi thì là cho kẹo trong thủi nước mát để cho ăn, thì rồi cho ăn rồi cái đi. Tôi không nói rằng ấy, nó đi thôi, cái việc đi rồi cừ đi chứ tiếng mình không biết, rồi cừ rồi ok, rồi đi, không có. Rồi đi rồi cái thì biết cái tiếng ok đó. Rồi đi rồi cái rồi một đợt thứ nhì nữa thì cũng vô rồi chế nước cho uống. Nó không nói gì. Rồi coi là đợt thứ ba là đổ quân xuống mà. Giết ở đâu chứ không có gì. Đó là giết hết. Con này giết sạch, hóa sạch. Không có còn ấy.
This monument marks the ditch where the largest numbers of people were executed. Scores of people, rounded up in sweeps of the village, were herded here to be shot by Lieutenant Kelly and others acting on his orders.
Đồng bào cái là đùa như vịt vậy, đùa xuống mương cây nó nhồ đầu. Cái thì cháy chơi, mẹ ơi, cho tôi lên về tội quá đi, không có bán tôi không có gì mà bán tôi tội quá, người dân vô tội quá đi. Thì bán rồi một lớp rồi cái cháy im. Thì coi như là em nhỏ về là nó bò theo mương cây nó. Thấy đứt ruột luôn, bò theo mương cây mà tôi là sắp chết, nó chặn ngạt quá, tôi không có làm sao ấy. Mà có làm sao cũng không biết, là bị thương nên không biết có làm sao. Thì mới bò về biết tới nhà thì là thấy lão đoàn kế đó thì cái thì đọc cùng lọc ố hiếp dâm, người thì có cái con thanh nữ thì là rạc cửa mình. Như vậy thì không biết là cái lý do làm sao.
During flying around, we came across a ditch. It had bodies in it, a lot of them. Women, kids, old men. I remember thought going through my mind, how did these people get in the ditch? And I finally thought about the Nazis, I guess, and marching everybody down into the ditch and blowing them away. Here we are supposed to be the good guys in the white hats. It upset me. As we were flying over it one time, we noticed, some movement in it. And Angelrada, who was my crew chief, spotted a child moving around amongst, the bodies that were in there. So we landed the aircraft next to the ditch, and we got out of it, and my gunner, stood on one side of the aircraft, and I stood on the other. Angelrada went down wading, through the bodies, and brought back up, a little child about 3 years old. It was obvious how the people got in the ditch by then, I guess. So we got the child on board, and we were, getting that child out of there. There was more we probably could have saved, but we, couldn't carry it. So we flew the child to Quang Nga Hospital, I believe it was, and dropped it off with a nun there. It was a very sober flight going over there, very quiet, trying to figure it out. I was looking at the kid, which I thought was a boy about 4 years old, 3 years old. I had a son at home, same age. And you're thinking it could be your kid. It was a quiet flight. Later found out in some investigations and hearings that it was actually a girl. You really couldn't tell. We checked arms and legs, There's no bullet wounds. It still hurts to think about us doing things like that.
Thì tôi chợt nghe tiếng chị tôi la. Trong nhà tôi đi nhìn ra thì tôi thấy chị Mùi tôi lúc đó là 14 tuổi. Trên người vậy một thằng Mỹ nó đang đè chị. Trên người chị không còn mặc cái quần áo nữa. Nhưng lúc đó tôi không hiểu đó là gì. Và sau này chị tôi đang ra sức chống cự lại nó. Và sau đó thì bọn Mỹ đã bắn luôn. Sau đó thì bọn Mỹ đứng lên, nó mặc quần áo vào và nó bắn luôn chị. Không bao giờ. Mỹ ơi là Mỹ. Và là sao không còn biết thời gian là bao lâu. Không còn nghe một tiếng động nào nữa. Đi từ dưới hầm nhà tôi mới chui lên thì nhà đã cháy rụi. Và ngay trên hè nhà những người thân của tôi bị chúng chết cháy cong queo. và tại giữa sân nhà này. Mẹ tôi và đứa em 17 đang ôm đứa em bạc, tay vẫn còn ôm em, đứa em 7 tháng của tôi. Bị chúng chắc đồ đốt, mà chỉ bị cháy nửa thân người. Lúc đó tôi không còn biết gì nữa, chỉ biết đứng bên mẹ mà khóc.
As a professional soldier, I had been taught to carry out the orders, and no time it ever crossed my mind to disobey or to refuse to carry out an order that was issued by my superiors.
So if one of your men had refused to shoot, what would have happened to him? What would you have said to him?
If one of my men had refused to shoot, I shudder to think what have been the repercussions, because it's hard to say now what I would have done looking back. At the time that it actually, when it happened, he would have been in serious trouble.
What kind of trouble?
He could have faced court-martial. He could have been shot on the spot for refusing an order in face of the enemy, in face of hostile fire. Someone refuses to carry out an order, he's in trouble.
But there was no hostile fire.
At the time, we didn't realize it. There was no hostile fire at the time.
So are you suggesting that if one of your troops had refused to shoot, shall we say, an old woman or a young child at My Lai on that day, that they would have faced disciplinary action?
They most definitely would have faced disciplinary action had they refused to fire or kill or carry out the orders, yes.
But these were young kids. Most of them had never killed anybody before. I mean, to kill a child seems a monstrous thing. Why were these people able to do this without questioning it?
I feel that they were able to carry out the assigned task, the orders. That meant killing small kids, killing women, because they were soldiers. They were trained that way. They was trained that when you get into combat, it's either you or the enemy. And they were the people that were in that village, the women, the little kids, the old men, were all considered the enemy.
So, leaving aside the question of following orders, do you think that that order was morally right, and that the actions of the troops that followed that order, yourself included, were behaving in a moral fashion?
I feel that we carried out the orders in a moral fashion, and the orders of destroying the village, of killing the people in the village. I feel that we carried out our orders, and I feel that we did not violate any moral standards.
This GI was the only American casualty at My Lai. He'd accidentally shot himself. Despite the total absence of hostile fire, Callie continued to order his men to shoot. Most obeyed. A few refused.
Lieutenant Kelly ordered certain people to shoot these people, and I was one of them, and I refused. And he told me that he was going to have me a court-martial when we got back to base camp. And I told him what was on my mind at the time. Ordering me to shoot down innocent people, that's not an order. That's craziness to me, you know? And so I don't feel like I have to obey that.
Most
and
of the
if you want to court-martial me, you do that. If you can get away with it. I feel like it was horrible, you know, just a terrible thing to be going on, and American boys doing this, you know? And I feel like I'm a red-blooded American boy, just like any of the rest of the guys that was there, you know? And to see that, I'm talking about black or white, you know, black and white guys doing this, you know, it didn't make any difference. I'm saying it just seemed like a horrible thing. I'm talking, we all came from the same place. To me, you know, we all came from the same place, and I know they all had to have the same values that I had somewhere along the line. If they didn't get it in school, they had to get it in religion, church, or someplace, you know. If you didn't go to school, you know, you could pick it up from a stranger, you know. It's just simple, you know. But then to go and do something like this, it's immoral to me, you know. That's just the way I feel about it.
Private Michael Bernhardt was another of the GIs who refused to shoot civilians.
I thought that most of the values that people held were pretty solid, that when we defined things as being good and bad, that they were good or bad. Killing a bunch of civilians in this way, babies, women, old men, people who were unarmed, helpless, was wrong. Every American would know that. And yet, this company, sitting out here isolated in this one place, didn't see it that way. I'm sure they didn't. What people think of you back home don't matter. This group of people that they were with was all that matters. It was the whole world. What they thought was right, and what they thought was wrong. Courage was seen as stupidity. Cowardice was cunning and wariness, and cruelty and brutality was sometimes seen as heroic. That's the way things began and started to change, and that's what it eventually turned into.
By 11:30, when Charlie Company broke for lunch, they had killed around 400 people. Newspapers in America hailed a significant victory, with many enemy dead. For over a year, what really happened at My Lai remained hidden from the outside world.
Gentlemen, it was late in April 1968 that I first heard of Pinkville and what allegedly happened there. I received that first report with some skepticism, but in the following months I was to hear similar stories from such a wide variety of people that it became impossible for me to disbelieve that something rather dark and bloody did indeed occur sometime in March 1968 in a village called Pinkville in the Republic of Vietnam.
With this letter sent to leading members of Congress, America began to learn the truth about My Lai. Its author was an ex-GI who'd heard about the massacre while serving in Vietnam.
When I sat down with a friend who had been there 3 weeks after the massacre, and we were telling each other war stories, and we hadn't seen each other in 3 months, and I said, "What have you been doing?" He said, "What have you been doing?" He said, "Oh man, did you hear what we did at Pinkville?" I said, "No, what'd you do at Pinkville?" He said, "We went in there and we killed everybody." I said, "Killed everybody? What do you mean?" He said, "We just shot them, lined them up and shot them down. 300, 400, 500 people, I don't know how many." And my immediate reaction was, you know, these no good sons of bitches. Look what they've gotten me into, look what they've gotten us all into. They left me now with a choice to turn in my friends or to be a part of this horrible crime. And I'm not going to be a part of this horrible crime. The only way to not be a part of the horrible crime is to discover the truth and to pursue it and let the chips fall wherever they land. And that's what I set out to do. The smaller massacres, the murders of 1 and 2 and 3 people at a time, allowed you to evade the truth of what you were involved in. When you murder a village of 500 people, or you know that a village of 500 people has been murdered in one afternoon, in one morning, it's pretty tough to evade the reality of that and the implications of that. One of my friends, when he told me about it, said, "You know, it was this Nazi kind of thing." And that's exactly right. It was this Nazi kind of thing. We didn't go there to be Nazis. At least none of the people I knew went there to be Nazis. I didn't go there to be a Nazi.
News of the massacre spread a wave of horror around the world. In America, initial incredulity turned quickly to shame and national anguish. As the inquiries and trials began, the men of Charlie Company emerged to public scrutiny. Sergeant David Mitchell, accused of shooting people at the ditch site in My Lai.
I'm not guilty.
Charlie Company's commanding officer, Captain Ernest Medina.
I can further say that I did not see any slaughter at My Lai 4 that day, and none was reported to me. And I'll further state that I did not order any massacre at My Lai 4.
Lieutenant William Calley, originally charged with 109 murders. Callie came to embody the issues at the heart of the case. His defense, that he was only following orders, evoked disturbing comparisons with the Nazis at Nuremberg. Meanwhile, army investigators returned to My Lai as part of a massive inquiry which was to put the facts of the massacre beyond dispute. The original list of charges drawn up by the Army's Criminal Investigation Department left no doubt about the nature of Charlie Company's operations in My Lai.
Based on the original documents that we received as a result of our investigations, it was a massacre. It was a violation of all the rules of land warfare that I've ever known in my life, because it was just cold-blooded killing of people who appeared to be defenseless civilians.
But the prosecutors misjudged public opinion. Attitudes to Callie in particular reflected a growing hostility to the prosecution of My Lai veterans.
All I can say is thank you all very much, each and every one of you that has supported me, and also those that are supporting the men still over in Vietnam and the United States Army. Thank you very much.
There was a change in the public attitude. Now they say, wait a minute, you shouldn't be prosecuting soldiers for just carrying out their duties. All of a sudden, the public sentiment had swung the other direction. And when Callie's sentence was announced, his conviction and sentence was announced, there was an outcry.
Of the 46 men who were seriously investigated for crimes at My Lai, William Callie was the only man ever convicted. Today, Callie runs a jewelry shop in Columbus, Georgia. He does not give interviews about My Lai. At his trial, these were his last words of explanation to his judges.
If I have committed a crime, the only crime that I have committed is in judgment of my values. Apparently, I valued my troops' lives more than I did that of the enemy. When my troops were getting massacred and mauled by an enemy I couldn't see, I couldn't feel, and I couldn't touch, that nobody in the military system ever described as anything other than communism. They didn't give it a race, they didn't give it a sex, they didn't give it an age. They never let me believe it was just a philosophy in a man's mind. And that was my enemy out there. And then when it became between me and that enemy, I had to value the lives of my troops. And I feel that is the only crime I have committed.
William Callie served only 3 days in jail before being released by President Nixon into house arrest pending appeal. 3 years after his original life sentence, he was released on parole, a free man.
Nhớ biết suy nghĩ cho nên dò đây. Nhớ biết suy nghĩ ngủ không được. Nhỏ có một mình vất vả đó rồi không biết nhà ở đó có đồ suy nghĩ miết. Buồn rầu miết. Nên dò đây chứ. Cam thù lắm chứ không tha thứ đâu. Không tha thứ. Phải cháy cho thâu chứ sống là cam thù lắm. Cứ trẻ con mới lớn dày mà nó giết hết trơn. Còn đương bố vậy nó cũng giết hết trơn mà làm sao mà không cam thù. Cam thù lắm. Bà mẹ dò đó, 30 tuổi, 80 tuổi mà cũng ra chỗ đó nằm dò cháy. Cam thù.
I wish I could bring them back, but I can't. I'd ask for their forgiveness, but the damage was already done. When we went in there with a purpose. And deep down we felt what we were doing was right. But after it was over, everyone knew it was wrong. And the damage was already done. It was too late.
Tôi thưa các cô, nếu là cái người dân người dân vô tội thì đừng có bán người dân vô tội. Còn cái người nào mà kẻ thù của nó thì nó giết người dân không quan. Chứ cái này đương bưng chén cơm ăn mà cũng phải đành mà cháy, đương ngậm cái củ trong miệng cũng đành cháy. Người như vậy mà hiếp dâm rồi rạc rửa mình như vậy lên, nó cam thù biết là bốn kế. Người dân vô tội không có cái gì hết. Với nó người dân đối xử với người Mỹ mà hình dũng vậy, nó không bán phá, giết sạch, đốt sạch, cũng ôm bụng mà chịu. Này, đồng bộ tôi là cam thù, còn sống sót người nào là cam thù. Những người Mỹ giết người dân vô tội, toàn óc.
How can you forgive? You know, I can't forgive myself for the things, even though I know it was something that I did and something that I was told to do. But how can I forgive that? I forgive. I can't. I live with it every day. It's easy for you to say, well, you go ahead with your life. But how can you go ahead with your life when this is holding you back? I can't put my mind to anything positive because it's always negative.
Trong nhiều lúc quá buồn thì tôi nghĩ rằng tôi sẽ đi nơi khác làm ăn. Nhưng mà sau đó thì tôi nghĩ ra, vì nơi nào trên đất nước tôi thì cũng vậy thôi. Nơi đây tôi còn có quê hương, có bà con, và điểm an ủi tôi nữa. Còn những ngôi mộ của người mẹ và của những người thân, nên tôi không thể nào bỏ nơi này mà để được.
These people were tortured by this. They were kids, 18, 19 years old. Most of them had never been away from home before they went to the service. And they end up in Vietnam. And in a moment, following orders, in a context in which they've been trained and prepared to follow orders, they do what they're told, and they shouldn't have, and they look back a day later and realize that they probably made the biggest mistake of their life. There are only a few people who were in those circumstances who had the presence of mind and the strength of their own character that would see them through that circumstance. Most people didn't. And for most of them, even people that I personally just was stunned to discover that they'd made the wrong choice, they did. And they had to live with it. They have to live with it. And so do I. So do we all.
There's a part of me that's kind and gentle. There's another part of me that's evil and destructive. Very evil and destructive. There's more destructiveness in my mind than goodness. There's more wanting to kill or to hurt than to love or to care. I don't let anyone get close to me. That loving feeling or the caring feeling is not there.
And that was caused by My Lai, you think?
That was caused by My Lai. My little boy playing in my grandmother's front yard here in Jackson, at his grandmother's house. And there were some teenagers across the street got into an argument. It was 14 and 15. And one went home and got a gun. And the other one just ran in the direction where my little boy was playing. And he shot him in the head. I was in the house. And I came out and picked him up. But he was already dead. He was dying. So when I looked at him, his face looked like the same face of the child that I had killed. And I said, this is the punishment for me killing the people that I killed. And when the picture that I had They had his funeral. I got back from the funeral that night. That's the way it cracked. And I left it like that. It just cracked.
How much of this stuff do you have?
I take 1,200 milligrams every 4 hours, 4 times a day of drugs and medication. I have to take it. I need it. That's the only thing that held me somewhat stable. Not as nervous. I stay nervous, even with the medication. But if I don't take it, I just go off. Just keep me under control. It helps me. Because if I don't, I may do something to someone. Even though I still have a tendency to think that of hurting someone. But the medication helps me, really helps me. But I have to take a lot of it. And it's strong, you know. It's very strong.
Do you think this really dreadful condition that you're in, this terrible life that you're leading, do you think it's ever going to come to an end?
Yeah, when I kill myself. It ought to come to an end. Like I said, I tried suicide 3 times. Maybe the good Lord is not ready for me to go, because I could have been dead with all the stuff I had taken and tried to. But eventually, it's not out of my mind. Like I'm sitting talking to you now, I can't promise that when you come again, I'll be here. Because before you came, I had to get out of the hospital from trying suicide for the 3rd time.
The good Lord doesn't appear to have treated you very well, to have put you through all this.
I still believe in him, but I guess you live a life for a reason, for a purpose. Now, what that purpose is to have me still here, I don't know.
Are you ashamed or sorry for what you've done?
Yes, I'm ashamed, I'm sorry, I'm guilty. But I did it. You know, what else can I tell you? It happened. You're looking at someone that did it. It can happen if you go to war. Those are the type of things will happen. It can happen to anyone. After they train you and they program you, it can happen. It happens. That's reality. That's what war is. War is not something that I shoot at you, you shoot at me. Well, we take time out. You know, well, don't shoot me here, don't shoot at you. War is war. It's killing in all type of ways. And that's where we don't need another war.
Don't be walking up to that man's back. Keep that distance. I told you what it was. Hey, keep your head and eyes straight to the front. Why, you seem like you can't hang? Keep that distance. Hold that weapon up.
The My Lai Massacre was carried out by ordinary American youngsters whose average age was 20. They'd been only 7 weeks in Vietnam. It didn't take long to change them from supposedly civilized people to barbarians, only some months of military training and the pressures of war. The training hasn't changed perceptibly. Given another war, it could all happen again. First Tuesday will be back in June. Until then, good night.